Before we start this afternoon's meeting, I have an announcement. Please note that interpretation is available on the Chinese channel. The Lithuanian language will be translated. Expert and delegation, once again, I would like to pronunciation. The Lithuanian translation will be a Chinese channel. Yes, thank you so much. I call to order the 805th meeting of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The committee will now proceed with Agenda Item 5, consideration of report submitted by State Party under Article 35 of the Convention. This afternoon, the committee will begin its consideration of the combined second and third period report of Lithuania. I had the honor to warmly welcome the distinguished delegation of the Republic of Lithuania, headed by Ms. Lita Grigaliene, Vice Minister of Social Security and Labor of the Republic of Lithuania and Head of Delegation. Vice Minister Excellency, a very warm welcome to you and to all members of your delegations. I also warmly welcome the representative of the Independent Monitoring Mechanism of Lithuania. Captioning, international sign language, and interpretation in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic are available, and also Lithuanian translation also. This meeting is also webcast on UN Web TV. Today, the task force facilitating the dialogue with Lithuania is composed of Ms. Robin Jacobs, Mr. Floyd Morris, and Mr. Alfred Kwasi. The task force is supported by the Secretariat. Ms. Robin Jacob will lead Cluster 1, and Mr. Alfred Kwasi will lead Cluster 2, and Mr. Floyd Morris will lead Cluster 3. The dialogue will follow a back-to-back question and answer format. During each round, committee experts will raise their questions, and distinguished delegation will then be given the opportunity to respond. Today, we will first address Cluster 1, covering Article 1 to 9 and Article 31, 32, and 33 of the Convention. Following a 15 minutes break, we will continue. We'll follow our questions concerning Cluster 1. We will and then begin Clause 2, covering Article 10 to 20 of the Convention. I wish to draw the delegation's attention to the importance of carefully time management. Where a question cannot be fully answered within the available time, the relevant information may be provided to the committee in writing following the dialogue. Now I would like to give the floor to the head of delegation. Excellency, Ms. Rita Grigaliene, Vice Minister of the Social Security and Labor of the Republic of Lithuania, to deliver her open remarks. The head of delegation had a maximum speech time of 20 minutes. Excellency, you have the floor.
Gerbiama pirmininkė,
Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee, honorable representatives of the community of persons with disability, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to present Lithuania's progress in implementing the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It is an honor for me to lead the Lithuanian delegation. Joining me are Indrek Ižienė, chair of the Seimas Parliamentary Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and member of the Parliament, then Aura Semashkienė, Minister Plenipotentiary and Deputy to the Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Ambassador of the Republic of Lithuania to the United Nations Office and other international organizations in Geneva, as well as colleagues from the Agency of the Protection of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Ministries of the Environment, Social Security and Labor, Health, Education, Science and Sports, and Justice, and the Ministry of the Interior, all of whom are ready for constructive dialogue. Last September, the 15th anniversary of the entry into force of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, commemorated in Lithuania, once again reaffirmed the state's commitment to creating an inclusive and accessible society for all. I would like to express my delight that in June this year, Lithuania's candidate Dovilė Juodkaitė was elected as a member of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The fact that we continue to enjoy the trust of other states to participate in the work of this important committee is seen by us as a recognition of the expertise that Lithuanian experts and our consistent commitment to implementing the convention. Lithuania already has experience of the committee's work. Professor Jonas Ruškus was a member during the previous term. For us, the framework law that we have has established a new attitude to the persons with disabilities, and the concepts of this law are in line with international human rights standards. And the Agency of the Protection of Persons with Disabilities, which is the central institution responsible for the participation of people with disabilities in public life and the assessment of their individual needs and coordination of help. The new model is applied since 2024, and it helps comprehensively assessing individual needs and environmental factors, and through the provision of coordinated support, it helps overcome the barriers preventing these people from participating fully in society on an equal footing with others. And the coordination of help based on the one-stop shop principle, when it's not the individual who seeks out support from institutions, but the institutions that seek out the individual in order to provide the support they need, together with the new disability assessment system, increases the accessibility of services and ensures that support is organized more effectively. Over the course of the year, the number of decisions made by the Agency for the Protection of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities regarding the coordination of support and the drawing up of support plans has almost doubled, from around 8,000 to nearly 15,000. In the first half of this year, institutions have been given more than 11,000 support plans to be implemented. And this shows the large scale of the coordination of help. The amendments to the Equal Opportunities Act have established clearer regulations on the provision of reasonable accommodation, strengthening the right of people with disabilities to equal opportunities and non-discrimination. Currently, European Union Equality Directive provisions are being transposed into the Lithuanian legislation concerning multiple intersecting and linked discrimination. Particular attention is paid to the well-being of children with disabilities and their families. In 2025, more than 1,000 families raising children with disabilities received social care services, whilst funding for these services increased from more than 34 million in 2022 to more than 44 million in 2025. Community-based services and early intervention are being expanded. In 2025, more than 950 children with disabilities received services at children's day centers, and nearly 1,800 children were provided with assistive devices. From 2026, earlier intervention has been established as a permanent service. In addition, under the European Child Guarantee, a project worth 56 million euros is being launched to increase the availability of services for children with moderate and severe disabilities and their families across 54 local authorities. Significant progress has been achieved in recent years. In the institutions under the Ministry of Social Security and Labor, the number of children with disabilities living in institutional care has fallen from 46 to 4. At the same time, forms of care close to the family and community are being expanded. In 2026, there were 8 family homes housing 49 children with disabilities. Moreover, in 2024, we continued to develop the professional care model, and the institution of the permanent carer was established. Permanent carers are, among other things, able to look after children with disabilities. Lithuania is particularly proud that in December 2024, the last of the old-style large children's care homes were closed. Since then, children have been placed exclusively in family or community-based care settings. Children with disabilities cannot now be placed in large care institutions, with the exception of specialized nursing and social care units for children with severe disabilities. Since 2024, 2 such care units have been established, and they have 23 places for children with severe disability. Lithuania is consistently raising public awareness of the rights of people with disabilities and is combating stereotypes. In 2024-25, more than 600 educational activities and events were organized, and they were attended by more than 20,000 people. Although public awareness is growing, stereotypes and discrimination still limit the opportunities available to people with disabilities. So measures to promote education and raise awareness remain important. With regard to accessibility, state and local authority bodies are required to provide information through accessible communication methods chosen by people with disabilities. And they are supposed to publish key information on their websites in plain language and in Lithuanian Sign Language. To implement these changes, the agency's consultation center, since its establishment in 2024 to date, has provided around 5,000 consultations. Lithuania has developed a national building accessibility monitoring system, STASIS, which enables progress to be assessed and measures to improve accessibility to be planned. In 2025, nearly 5,000 public facilities were assessed, a public accessibility map was created, and universal design recommendations were drawn up. All newly registered public transport vehicles must be adapted for people with disabilities. Over the past 4 years, the proportion of accessible transport has increased significantly. In municipal transport, from 45 to 61%, and then on long-distance buses, from 3 to 34%, and ferries are fully accessible, and the proportion of accessible trains will increase from 44% to 76% by 2027. More than 73% of educational establishments are at least partially accessible to people with mobility impairments. More than 200 projects to adapt primary healthcare infrastructure have been implemented in accordance with the principles of universal design. Around 27 million euros has been allocated to these projects. The number of services adapted for people with disabilities in museums has increased almost 5 times, and in performing arts venues more than threefold. Although significant progress has been made in the area of accessibility in recent years, the adaptation of the physical information and digital environments remains one of the top priorities. Lithuania has strengthened the inclusion of people with disabilities in crisis management and civil protection by ensuring accessible information and contingency planning. More than 3 million euros have been allocated to local authorities to adapt over 500 shelters, and in 2025, 300 specialists took part in civil protection training. Legislative amendments have been drafted to strengthen guarantees of legal capacity for people with disabilities, expand measures to support decision-making, and increase opportunities for the independent exercise of rights. A pilot scheme for the decision-making support service was launched in 2019 and 2023 in 6 regions of the country. During this period, more than 500 people received support, and currently more than 900 people are receiving support. In addition, 42 legal proceedings have been initiated, out of which 17 resulted in the full or partial restoration of the individual's legal capacity. For individuals who, due to their disability, find it difficult to exercise their right to defense independently, the mandatory participation of a defense lawyer and state-funded secondary legal aid are guaranteed. In 2024 and 25, this was provided in approximately 3,300 cases each year. The World Health Organization's Quality Rights Initiative is being implemented in Lithuania. Since 2024, the National Human Rights Monitoring System has covered the 7 largest psychiatric institutions, and assessments are carried out by a network of 16 trained assessors. There are around 116 mental health centers operating in the country, with plans to expand the network of daycare centers and increase the number of community treatment teams from 3 to 19. Currently, 23 specialized comprehensive support centers are accredited and operational, providing emotional, psychological, and legal support to people who have experienced domestic violence across the country. Funding for these centers has doubled since 2023, and in 2026 it reached around 3.3 million euros.
75,000 euros are allocated annually to the Methodological Support Center for Specialized Comprehensive Support Centers. Close cooperation with non-governmental organizations representing the interests of people with disabilities has enabled the systematic integration of disability considerations into mechanisms for the prevention, protection, and support relating to domestic violence. The development and widespread application of algorithms, criteria for identifying disability, methodological recommendations for local authorities, and targeted training have strengthened professionals' ability to recognize violence against people with disabilities and to provide individualized support tailored to their needs. To tackle the systemic problems of invisibility in the area of sexual violence, the National Center for Information on Sexual Violence, PRABILC, was established with an annual budget of 100,000 euros allocated to its operations. Last year, 176 people contacting the center, 60 of whom had disabilities, and support was provided to 5 unique individuals with disabilities. Lithuania is consistently implementing the transition from institutional care to community-based services with the aim of ensuring the right of people with disabilities to live independently and be full members of the community. Regional service deployment maps based on the needs of people with disabilities and their families as identified by local authorities have formed the basis for planning the expansion of the community-based service network across the country. By 2030, the plan is to create around 1,200 community accommodation places and expand daycare services for more than 800 people with disabilities, thereby strengthening their opportunities to live in the community. Between 2020 and 2024, 95 community service facilities were established across 6 regions. More than 36 million euros were allocated for their development, enabling 550 people to transition from institutional care to community-based living arrangements. Since 2024, the case management model has been implemented in almost all of Lithuania's municipalities, helping people with intellectual and/or psychosocial disabilities to access services in the community that meet their individual needs. Since the model's launch, case management has already been applied to nearly 1,300 people. Since 2020, the number of adapted homes has more than doubled, from around 400 to nearly 1,000, while state funding for home adaptation has increased from around 1.7 million to nearly 5.6 million euros. Lithuania has significantly improved access to technical assistance measures. The number of beneficiaries has risen from around 33,000 to nearly 38,000. The approval rate for applications has increased from nearly 88% to over 95%, while state funding has almost doubled from around 3.8 million to over 7.4 million euros. The Social Services Act provides for a respite care service to which 3.2 million euros are allocated annually. Preventive social services and comprehensive family services are available in all local authorities to increase the family's independence and prevent social risks. Between 2021 and 2025, expenditure on cash social assistance increased by 78%, from over 700 million to 1.25 billion euros. Over the same period, the level of basic social benefits rose by 75%, while funding for compensation for the costs of providing individual assistance more than doubled, from 187 million euros in 2020 to nearly 379 million in 2025. The financial security of families raising children with disabilities has been consistently strengthened. Over the past 5 years, child benefits have increased by 75%. And from 2026, a child with a disability will receive a monthly payment of nearly 206 euros. Lithuania is implementing an inclusive education policy. In the 2025-26 academic year, nearly 44,000 pupils had special educational needs, of whom around 37,500 were educated in mainstream classrooms. To strengthen schools' capacity to educate children with disabilities, 9 regional special education centers are in operation, while funding for educational support has increased from over 112 million euros in 2022 to over 188 million euros in 2025. Lithuania is consistently improving the accessibility of healthcare services for people with disabilities by applying an assessment model for healthcare facilities that are accessible to people with reduced mobility and by establishing mandatory accessibility requirements for emergency departments. Outpatient nursing services are provided at home to individuals, including people with disabilities. Over the past 5 years, the volume of these services has increased by almost 90%, with around 70,000 patients benefiting from them. Last year, nearly 34 million was allocated to cover co-payments for reimbursable medicines. This support reached around 400,000 low-income residents, including people with disabilities. More than 49,000 people with disabilities are employed in the open labor market, but their overall employment rate has remained at around 30% in recent years. This indicates that despite new measures, including a 5% quota in the public sector, significant barriers to employment still remain in the labor market. We are currently assessing the effectiveness of measures to support the employment of people with disabilities and will decide on how to improve them based on the results. In recent years, income support and social protection have been increased. From 2025, a proportion of old age pensioners with severe disabilities have received pensions that are 7 to 50% higher, while compensation for the costs of personal assistance ranges from 131 to 569 euros per month. Chair, members of the committee, representatives of the disability community, although significant progress has been made in recent years in strengthening the rights of people with disabilities, we recognize that we must continue the changes we have begun. We are carefully considering the committee's recommendations and see them as an opportunity to further improve the daily lives of people with disabilities, to reduce remaining barriers, and create an even more open and inclusive society. We are committed to continuing this work alongside with people with disabilities and their organizations, deciding not for them, but with them, together with those people. Thank you. We are ready to answer the committee's questions.
Excellency, on behalf of the committee, I thank you for your introductory statement. I would like to now give the floor to the representative of the Independent Monitoring Mechanism of Lithuania. The representative of Independent Monitoring Mechanism has maximum speaking time of 5 minutes. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished and of the committee and members of this delegation. My name is Klementina Gruzdienė, and I am Chair of Lithuania Monitoring Commission on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The independent monitoring mechanism under Article 33 of the Convention. On behalf of our Commission, thank you for the opportunity to take part in this review. We welcome recent progress. Disability rights are more visible, and positive steps have been taken in personal assistance, deinstitutionalization, and emergency planning. However, our monitoring shows a clear gap between the law and everyday lives of persons with disabilities. Implementation often across our country. Access to rights and services often depends on where a person lives or how an institution understands the law, instead of person's needs. This creates unequal opportunities. First, independent living remains out of reach for many persons with disability, especially those with high support needs. Community receives different between municipalities. Personal assistance and other support are not always based on individual needs and preferences. Families often provide support that should be ensured by the state. Second, equality and non-discrimination remain a serious concern. The law of reasonable accommodation has been strengthened but is still not understood or provided in many areas. Persons with disabilities therefore continue to experience discrimination. Third, accessibility remains a major barrier. Many public buildings, transport services, websites, and information are still inaccessible. Monitoring and enforcements are too weak and divided between different institutions. Fourth, legal capacity raises serious human rights concerns. Reforms are beginning discussed, but the proposed change still allow decisions to be made for persons. We don't ensure enough support for people to make their own decisions based on their will and preferences. Inclusive education also remains a challenge. Being in a mainstream school does not actually mean being included. Many learners with disabilities still do not receive the support and resembles a reasonable accommodation they need. Emergency preparedness has improved, but it remains uneven, especially at the local level. Many persons with disabilities would need help during an evacuation. However, clear support plans, accessible communication, transport, and shelters are still lacking. Finally, Lithuania needs better disability data. Without data on violence, accessibility, independent living, and women and girls with disabilities, it is difficult to plan policy and monitoring progress. As the independent monitoring mechanism, we identify these gaps and support improvements through independent monitoring and constructive dialogue. We will attend this session as observers and listen carefully. We believe the committee's conclusions will guide further reforms and monitoring work. Above all, we hope this review will improve the everyday lives of persons with disabilities and support the full implementation of a convention in Lithuania. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your statement. Now we will proceed to the first round of back-to-back questions and answering regarding clause 1, covering Article 1 to 9 and Article 31, 32, 33 of the Convention. This segment will be lasted for 60 minutes and will conclude for 30 p.m. The first round will be led by member of the task force facilitating the dialogue. I will now call upon Ms. Robin Jacobs, the task force coordinator, for her opening remarks and to begin the questions. Ms. Robin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. I have the honor of serving as Task Force Coordinator for the CRPD Committee's review of Lithuania. I'm very pleased to be here and to welcome you warmly on behalf of my colleagues and myself. Committee members, Mr. Alfred Kowasi and Mr. Floyd Morris and I together form the 3 pillars of this task force. Lithuania is a country rich in history and culture, which has been shaped over the centuries by adversity and prosperity. We look forward to learning more about the work that you are doing to protect the rights of persons with disabilities. Let me start by thanking the head of delegation for her opening statement. The committee welcomes this constructive dialogue, which occurs further to the state party's submission of its combined second and third periodic reports pursuant to Article 35 of the Convention. We thank the Government of the Republic of Lithuania for sharing information on the progress that you've made in implementing the Convention through your report. Certainly since the time that Lithuania has ratified the Convention, you've taken steps to implement it. These measures include reviews of laws and policies to harmonize them with the Convention. We acknowledge the positive steps that you've taken, At the same time, we note that additional steps may be needed. We're guided by information received from you as the state party, from civil society, and from others. We are committed to using this dialogue productively in order to receive greater information from you so that we may provide recommendations on what still needs to be done. During this dialogue, we will seek clarification and additional information through questions that we've prepared further to our analyses of the material available to this point. As members of the committee, we work independently and impartially to identify areas and means of improvement. So as task force member responsible for cluster 1, let me turn now to my questions. And I'll start with questions on articles 1 to 4. In its 2016 concluding observations, the CRPD committee recommended to Lithuania that the state party ensure that all existing and new laws and regulations and the definitions used therein comply with the human rights-based model of disability in accordance with the convention. It's clear that you've made conscientious efforts to create new statutes, or at least a new statute, the law on the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities of the Republic of Lithuania, the LFPRPD, as I'll call it by that acronym. And you've indicated in your reply to the list of issues that the focus is now on social inclusion, rights, environmental barriers, and participation, not just on medical criteria. As you know, the human rights model of disability underlies our convention. It enables an action to be taken to ensure substantive equality for persons with disabilities. It's premised on the social model geared towards protecting and promoting the dignity of persons with disabilities and committed to recognizing them as rights holders. It seeks to set aside the medical model of disability as well as charitable approaches. It aims to ensure that persons with disabilities are all included in society and respected on an equal basis with others. So the basic purpose, principles, and ideas underlying the convention and underlying the human rights model can be found in the convention itself, as well as general comment number 6 on Article 5. So there's some confusion, however, I'll say, as to what some of these underlying concepts, frameworks, and practices in the LRPRD reflect a human rights model or an outdated medical model. And there's also some confusion as to whether the concepts, frameworks, and practices in the legislation that are meant to be based on the human rights model actually align fully with that model. And so let me give you an example. This example stems from the definition section, Article 2 of the LPRPD. So while the definition at Article 213 seems to understand disability as involving the interaction of impairments and barriers in society, the definition of person with a disability, which is Article 2.5, is less clear. And I'll point out that 213, disability, talks about a long-term functional impairment of a person's body that due to environmental factors prevents the person from fully and effectively participating in society on an equal basis with others. But 2.5 talks about, this is the definition of person with a disability, a person who has been assigned a disability level or a participation level of 55% or less in accordance with the procedure established by this law. So my question to you is, could you please clarify whether the law on the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities is meant to be based on the human rights model, and perhaps speak a bit to why there is this kind of fluidity in the definitions I've given. And also, if you could speak to the harmonization efforts that are taking place, what concrete steps are being taken to ensure not only that the definitions used are based on the human rights model, but that all laws and regulations are based on this model. So perhaps I'll pause there and let you respond to these questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellency, you have the floor. I would like to kindly ask you to expert if when you give the question, would you more slowly because for the translation. Thank you so much.
Ačiū už gautą klausimą.
Thank you very much for the question. I will give the floor to the representative of the Ministry of Social Security and Labor, Daiva Zabarauskienė. The question is on how we ensure the harmonization with the human rights model of all the definitions. Thank you for the floor. I will speak on behalf of the Lithuanian delegation, and I will give you the information. As of 2024, we have the disability reform, which was drafted in consultation with the society and working with disability organizations, and we discussed the introduction of various definitions and concepts, and we have abandoned such concepts which are not dignified, that is, the disabled and so on, and those concepts that we are using have been chosen after public consultations, and we talked with the scientific community as well. I would like to mention that the law that we have is also based on the recommendations of the World Bank in relation to the treatment of the disability itself, and this is a long-term functional impairment or certain acquired qualities that prevent people from participating in the public life together with all other individuals. And this probably hides the treatment of the disability itself. We have to take into account not only the medical part, that is the change in functional abilities of the individual, but also the assistance that is needed for the individual for them to be able to participate on equal terms in the public life with everybody else. And at the moment, 40% is the evaluation of support and assistance, and 60% is the disability assessment, so that people can live in public life on equal terms with everybody else. Regarding the integration of the concepts in all other laws, the concepts that we have in the law on people with disabilities rights, all those definitions have been integrated in all other pieces of legislation, and the government has indicated to all the authorities drafting the legislation when making amendments to the legislation to take into account the new concepts and to abandon the concepts that are not dignified enough and that degrade the dignity of the person. That's about. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. I just want to add that I understand what you're saying. You've consulted with other organizations, et cetera, international organizations. However, I would like to flag that there is still some confusion as to whether or not this is truly on all fours with the human rights model of disability. It may be something to think about a bit further. I wanted to ask one quick question, which is about consultation. So thank you for explaining that you've consulted in developing this law. Is there a consistent practice for consultation? So are there steps that have been put in place that you follow each time you are doing anything, whether it's the development of legislation or review, et cetera, that involves persons with disabilities? Thank you.
Ačiū už pateiktą klausimą.
Thank you for the question. The question is, are there any practices of constant consulting with NGOs, and there are any measures taken to review the actions when we talk to people with disabilities? Ms. Zabarowskina will reply to the question. I would like to mention that when the disability reform came into force in 2024, the law on people with disabilities has enshrined the obligation for public authorities to consult and cooperate with NGOs. And we have the settled practice that all the legislation that are being publicly considered, they have to be submitted to NGOs as well. That represent people with disabilities, and their comments and proposals are always taken into consideration in working groups. We always include into those working groups people with disabilities at the ministerial level. When we speak about questions concerning people with disabilities, we talk to them about how can the society be made more friendly towards them. So this practice is very well settled, and the NGOs are very actively participating in it.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. It's interesting to hear about the consultation. From what we have heard and learned, it seems that there is a concern that there isn't always consultation, particularly at the municipal levels, and it may not be very clear what the consultation practice is or will be. I think that it's something that could be further clarified. Let me move now to questions about reasonable accommodation. And we've heard that the principle of reasonable accommodation, which is defined in the law, is legally operative, primarily in the field of employment, but that its denial is still not recognized as a form of disability discrimination in other sectors, such as education, health, justice, and social and other services. I wonder if you can speak to that, and in particular, indicate what steps will be taken to address this, to extend the concept of reasonable accommodation to fields such as education, health, and services. So yes, I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. The question about reasonable accommodation and what are further steps going to be. And this question will be answered by the representative of the Ministry of Education and Science, Ms. Regina Valutita. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this possibility to provide the information in the area of education, especially general education. Apart from the general legal acts and regulations, we also have the governmental decision which stipulates certain indicators and conditions to be established at schools in order to implement general curricula. And we have 5 specific criteria which in general are in line with the legal acts regulating reasonable accommodation of premises. The regulation is changing continually. We are monitoring the situation, and in order to improve it, the government reviews the requirements every year. And in 24-25, schools had to comply with one of the 5 criteria, 5 requirements in order to implement their curricula. In 26, they had to comply with 2, and beginning with next year, they will have to comply with 3 specific requirements. We must admit that currently we have 2 systems by which we monitor the data of accessibility. This is the education information system, where we monitor the compliance with the criteria that I mentioned, the criteria adopted by the governmental decision. And as of 2027, the ministries have agreed that all educational establishments will provide information on the accessibility to buildings based on the general requirements in the national status system. Thank you. And the representative of the Ministry of Health, Indra Balchunen, will further elaborate on this question. Excuse me, Ramona Andriušaitienė will take the floor now. Thank you for the floor. I'd like to provide additional information about accessibility and reasonable accommodation in the area of health services. The Ministry of Health is actively monitoring how health institutions are accommodating the conditions to people with disabilities. Every year we have a survey of health institutions where those institutions provide information about what they have done, what they have accomplished, and what is the accessibility in order to receive health protection services. According to the latest information, 95% of healthcare institutions have adapted the entrance to the institution, but we do understand that there are more challenges, namely the accessibility within the institution, also the provision of tactile conditions, the use of tactile devices, and the availability of tactile information. So we actively communicate with healthcare institutions, and we've continued to monitor the situation in order to make sure proper accessibility. Let me also stress that in the Ministry of Health, we have a working group, which includes also people with disabilities, and they also point out areas that need to be improved, the most sensitive areas where conditions for people with disabilities have to be improved. Thank you. And now the floor goes to the representative of the Agency for Persons with Disabilities, Agle Chaplikene. Thank you, honorable members of the committee. Thank you for the floor. The proper condition, the failure to create proper conditions for people with disabilities amount to discrimination based on disability. So all institutions and everybody have to implement this law, and people can file a complaint either to the ombudsman's office or through courts about the improper implementation of the laws. So we understand this not only as the adaptation of physical infrastructure, but also when there are no, sometimes even when there are no possibilities to physically adapt a building, people must be able to access certain services. So the institutions then have to look for other ways how to provide those services. So this is a much wider phenomenon, not only physical accessibility. So if it's impossible to physically adapt a building, or if it's too big a financial burden, then we must look for other ways to ensure that people can get the services they need in any other way.
That's been a very elaborate response. Thank you very much for your response. I would like to ask a follow-up question, though, which is that whether it's the Ministry of Health or within the context of education, you've indicated that you're working on things through working groups, etc. Is there a timeline? I mean, it's true that these issues can take time, but at the same time, we need to ensure that persons with disabilities can have appropriate access and reasonable accommodation within a time frame that in itself is reasonable. So what is the timeline that you are working on, working with? Let me ask a couple of other questions before I pause. My next question also deals with reasonable accommodation. Consumer services, is another area, transportation. These are areas, and employment. These are areas that continue to generate the highest number of disability-related discrimination complaints received by your Office of the Equal Opportunities Ombudsman. And so I'm wondering if there are specific measures planned or in place to reduce the complaints about discrimination in these areas. Will there be some sort of incentives or other means to be given to ensure that reasonable accommodation is brought in more effectively? Someone had mentioned remedies as well, indicating that one can go to the courts, etc. And I'm wondering if you can provide a bit more information. Are the remedies in the nature of specific performance? Do they require that the place or the context become accessible, or the discriminatory barrier be removed? Are there other remedies that are available, monetary compensation, for example? And how do people know of these remedies? So is the equality body out there, providing information to the public? Does one need to seek a lawyer, or is it possible to access this remedial pathway without a lawyer? So if you could speak a bit about both remedies and the timeline, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Ačiū už gautus klausimus.
Thank you for your questions. So the questions are about whether we work through working groups, also a timeline, in order to ensure that people with disabilities have adequate accessibility and reasonable accommodation. What's the timeline you're working with? And the second question is about consumer services and whether we have or plan specific measures in order to reduce the number of complaints in these areas, and whether there are incentives or other means in order to ensure proper accommodation, adaptation of the environment. And Mr. Regina Vilutite from the Ministry of the Education will reply to this. Additionally, the Ministry of Health, Ms. Ramona Andrušaitienė, and further on, it will be replied by Agle Čaplikėnė from the Agency for the Protection of Rights of People with Disabilities. Thank you for the floor. Yes, indeed, we have goals in the strategic documents that by 2030 we have to achieve at least 20% of total accommodation indicator in educational establishments. And this would be really a significant change as compared with the current 3% level. We have a specific timeline for the financial measures in different sectors for the different levels of education. We have funds planned for general education up to 2027, with the possibility to extend to 29. 63 schools should be adapted, and for this 46 million euros have been allocated. And in professional education, all 44 professional schools are participating, and more than 5 million euros have been allocated. And the period for the implementation is until 2029. Thank you for the floor. I would like to inform you about the improving the accessibility to healthcare services. We do understand that accommodating premises requires a lot of finances. So the Ministry of Health has adopted a decision that every healthcare establishment must have a certain rules for the provision of services to people with disabilities. So there has to be a description of rules how these services are provided in each healthcare institution. Let me draw your attention to the fact that each healthcare institution wishing to obtain a new license must submit these rules of procedure to the National Accreditation Service. This is a necessary precondition in order to receive a license for the provision of healthcare services. Also, in order to ensure that people are not discriminated in terms of healthcare service provision, the state accreditation service has a commission on the compensation of damages to patients, and they analyze all complaints received, including the complaints from people with disabilities. Thank you. There was a question about ways and means of informing people with disabilities on the legal remedies available to them, whether lawyers are necessary, etc. And this question will be replied by the representative of the Agency for People with Disabilities, Eglė Čaplikienė, and also Indra Balčiūnienė from the Ministry of Justice. Thank you for your question. I would like to add that we have equal opportunities ombudsperson, and people can complain to them concerning discrimination, including discrimination on the grounds of disabilities. The law on equal opportunities encompasses various areas and various grounds for discrimination, and we specifically focus on the ground of disability. So once there is a complaint received by the ombudsperson, the complaint is being analyzed and certain findings are then presented. And as for people, informing people about their rights, well, we have many campaigns for raising awareness. NGOs also contribute to this in order to spread the message that people have the right and the possibility to address the Equal Opportunities Ombudsperson. We also have the Lithuanian Administrative Dispute Commission, where people can complain if they don't receive necessary services from municipal or state institutions. And once the complaint is analyzed, the institution or the one who did not implement all the rules properly have to rectify the situation. So you don't need a lawyer here. Complaints can be filed in and written in simple language or understandable language, because then the ombudsperson's service continues to analyze the complaint. They contact they contact the offender and they communicate with all the parties.
Gerbiamoji pirmininkė, gerbėmieji.
Chair, committee members, thank you for the floor. On behalf of the Lithuanian delegation, I would like to add something. Speaking about the Equal Opportunities Ombudsman's Office. It is noteworthy that people with disabilities recognize abuse and discrimination regarding disability more often, and that's why they address the office more frequently with the request for advice. Statistically, in 2021, 125 complaints were received, and in 2024, the number has doubled, 290 times. So we can see that they recognize those forms of discrimination more and more. Speaking about the Ministry of Justice, to what extent they contribute to the publication of that information, we have drafted an electronic publication for victims of such abuse about their rights, and this has been publicized on our website. This has been translated in all foreign languages, and it has been adapted to people with disabilities. Speaking about the state guaranteed legal aid, they are being informed about such such rights to people with disabilities, and we have the state guaranteed legal aid, and this has been adapted to people with hearing disabilities. Those individuals have the mandatory right to receive the state guaranteed lawyer, and they have this right to receive free of charge state legal counsel. Thank you.
Thank you for your responses. We will have time later in cluster 2, et cetera, to enter into more detail about some of these issues, including access to justice. But I would like to move on at the moment to Article 6, dealing with women with disabilities. There was a national study conducted by the Lithuanian Union of Persons with Disabilities in 2024, and it found that mothers with disabilities continue to experience intersectional discrimination. And this is due to a lack of flexible and individualized parenting support, so parenting support services being inadequate. The study concluded that the main barriers arose from insufficient practical support, enabling women with disabilities to exercise their parenting responsibilities on an equal basis with others. And so I wonder if I can move us back to the question about legal remedies for discrimination and ask whether there are legal analytical frameworks that are used to address intersectional discrimination. So when discrimination affects, for example, a person with disabilities, not only because of their disability, but because of other factors like gender. This study on mothers with disabilities and the unique gendered impact that they experience shows how policies relating to gender and motherhood in particular could benefit from integrating concerns about women with disabilities, and how policies relating to persons with disabilities would be enhanced with information concerns about relating to gender and women with disabilities. So what measures are being taken to ensure that there is this mainstreaming of policies? As I said, I'm curious as well about the frameworks that are being used for analyzing intersectional discrimination at the equality body. Thank you.
Ačiū už gautus klausimus. Klausimai.
Thank you. These are the questions, the insufficient aid to enable women with disabilities, and what legal basis is used to solve such cases of discrimination, and how to analyze this intersectional discrimination, and how to ensure equality. And the question will be answered by the Ministry of Social Security and Labor, Loreta Doleikienė.
Gerbiamoji pirmininkė, gerbėmieji komiteto nariai, dėkoju už suteiktą žodį. Lietuvos delegacijos vardu norėčiau pateikti informaciją šiuo klausimu. Iš tiesų reikia pripažinti, kad moterys ypatingai
we have to admit that women with disabilities, especially having become mothers, encounter huge challenges, and that's why the state at national level has allocated funding to families uh, to uh, to provide social care services, and especially focuses on those families where with children under 2 years of age and under 3 years of age if these are children with disabilities. And when one of the parents has a disability, in that case, the state funds the support of a social worker and of an individual care worker. Also, the case management, if a complex or composite assistance is necessary for the family. Then there is a model that has been chosen to fund the service to the families with a child under 3 years of age that has a disability. This is because we are helping the mothers to take care of their children, but also to allow the children to be educated together with other children in preschool educational establishments. Also, there, there are social services provided to people with severe disabilities. This is in case of social care of people with severe disabilities. These are the services provided at home or daycare centers or social establishments where people are accommodated. The state provides a lot of attention, and the funding is increasing to these services. In 2021, the funding amounted to a bit over 60 million. Last year, the funding amounted to 145 million. This year, the planned budget is 200 million euros for social care services. This assistance helps mothers raising children with disabilities to stay in the labor market. We admit that we have been late with those services, and I hope that this will not happen in the future, but previously we used to be late with those services because when a child with a disability is born in the family, we provide the services too late, and then one of the family members have to drop out from the labor market. Thank you for the possibility.
If I could just ask a quick question, which is, you've mentioned children around the age range of 2 and 3. What about children in other age ranges?
Į šį klausimą atsakys
the representative of the Ministry of Social Security and Labor, Loretta Doligene, will answer the question. The children who are in need of social services, irrespectively of whether this is a child with or without a disability, all children over 6 years of age can receive the daycare center services. This is partially funded by the state, and the municipalities contribute to that. And we emphasize this opportunity a lot because people with disabilities often attend children's daycare center together with other community children. And this increases the inclusion rather than having a separate daycare center for children with disabilities only. But of course, we do have such specialized daycare centers for people with children with disabilities. This is very relevant when the children have a severe disability. Thank you. And the question will be supplemented by Ramona Andrušaitė from the Ministry of Social Security and Labor. Thank you. I would like to add, in order for mothers to be able to manage manage their lives better, we provide the service of attending the family. That is, as of the moment when the mother is expecting, a obstetrician and a team attends the family up until the child is born and until the child becomes 2 years of age. So they help the family during the first years of the child. Kristina Stepanova will add something to the response. Committee chair, members, thank you for the floor. I will give you some additional information. We are also strengthening the capacities of children's rights protection specialists to work with the parents who have children with disability and inform the parents about their rights. And this is provided with the plain language, easy language, or using visual means, or the sign language or other means. And we also get help of their family members or specialists that can provide the information in the adapted way. And we also have the training, that is the practical aspects of human rights specialists to evaluate the situation in families where there are members with psychosocial impairments.
18 minutes.
Yes,
The
thank
first
you.
part of the first one.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to a question about Article 8 and disability hate speech and disability hate crimes were added to your criminal code in 2017. Can you tell us about what measures have been put in place to ensure that they are working effectively? So how is effectiveness evaluated? I'm going to add a question as well about accessibility, Article 9. By the end of 2025, only 4% of key public buildings were accessible, against a national target that was 40%. So I'm wondering what measures are being put in place to ensure that accessibility standards will be developed, that there are some sort of indicators of success, and that you'll ensure that these standards are not only adequately funded, but that there's some sort of monitoring mechanism that includes persons with disabilities. So if you can speak a little bit about that. After that, if you could speak briefly to those, that would be wonderful. After that, I have a couple of questions about data collection. Thank you.
Ačiū už gautus klausimus. Klausimas.
Thank you for the questions. Now, regarding about hate crimes, what measures have been taken to prevent this hate practice? Haroldas Stabulis from the Ministry of Interior will reply. Chair, committee members, thank you for the floor. On behalf of the Lithuanian delegation, I would like to give you the information about the question. As of 2020, Lithuania has taken many steps to increase the response towards hate speech and hate crimes. One of the measures was the cooperation with the public, with society organization, various NGOs, and we have compiled an interinstitutional working group which holds meetings 2 to 4 times a year and drafts the report on the mentioned issues. We have also have drafted the methodological recommendations for the authorities fighting those crimes, and we are organizing a qualification upgrading training. We are also have the new position which observes the hate crimes on the internet. The Journalist Ethics Inspectors Authority also observes the public media about hate crimes in various articles, and 30 decisions were adopted last year in 7 cases. The law was violated in relation to hate speech, and in this case it was against the people with disability. Over 70 hate crimes have been registered in the context of the criminal code in relation to hate speech against on all grounds, and against. And out of them, 1 case was related to disability. Of course, this does not reflect the realistic situation, and the hate speech phenomenon has not been analyzed to the full extent. That's why we will be conducting a study on hate crimes and hate speech in relation to people with disability. Thank you. The question about indicators, accessibility indicators of public buildings, and 4%, while the national target is 40%. The question was, how do we ensure not only funding but also the monitoring mechanism involving people with disabilities, and what are the plans in this case? The question will be answered by the Ministry of Environment, Renata Planutienė.
Gerbiamoji pirmininkė,
Chair, committee members, thank you for the floor. On behalf of the Lithuanian delegation, I will give you the floor, will give you the response. According to the legal framework in Lithuania, the main requirements of accessibility have been regulated by the law on construction, and they are valid when planning the new buildings in case of renovation or upgrading of the buildings, and in case of reconstruction or renovation or modernization or repairs, the recent provisions of this regulation are applied for the parts of the building that are being renovated or reconstructed, etc. In order to keep the already applied measures in the building, there were orders adopted that supplemented the legal regulation of this requirement. And the monitoring is done by the municipal administrations. In case of the existing building, the accessibility is a continuous process, because part of the public infrastructure was constructed at the moment when the existing requirements were not applicable. According to the law on people with disability, the users of the buildings are responsible for adapting the buildings to people with disabilities. That's why all the funding possibilities have to be taken into account, and the condition of the building have to be taken into account to adapt the building, for instance, to install tactile indicators or lifts or so and so on. And we have created the information system Stasis for monitoring the building accessibility and control of the building, and at the moment the percentage of the highest standard accessibility building is 4.8%, and the partial adaptability is 42.1% of buildings. And the Stasis system carries out the evaluation of area according to various categories.
Thank you for your response. One thing that I note in your response is that there doesn't seem to be a a designed kind of process for incorporating the viewpoints of persons with disabilities. So that might be something to consider a little bit more. But I'd like to move on to data collection and statistics. So part of the main purpose of your statute on the protection of rights of persons with disabilities is to ensure that the individual assistance needs of persons with disabilities are met. In order to do this, it's really important to have adequate data and information on those needs. And we've heard concerns that municipalities lack comprehensive data on what the needs are, individual support needs. So could you please tell me, or please clarify, what steps are being taken to ensure that there's adequate information? I'd like to know as well, more broadly, whether your methods of collecting data draw on the Washington Group set of short questions, and how, if at all, organizations of persons with disabilities are brought into the process. So one would imagine that they would be data contributors and validators. Is that the case, and how does it work? Let me give you my final question as well, just so we can round this out. My final question deals with national implementation and monitoring, Article 33. And in 2019, that there was, we've noted generally that there has, in practice, been a lack of resources centered or sent to the Commission that does monitoring of persons with disabilities and their rights as part of the National Human Rights Institute. And I'm wondering how that will be rectified. So if funding has been set aside to ensure that the body can act independently, if resources, including technical resources, have been set aside as well, and whether this is for a multi-year basis, et cetera. So a bit more on how you ensure that the office remains standing and remains independent. Maybe I'll add one more thing to ensure that there is security of tenure so that those who are in the Commission are there for fixed terms. Okay, thank you very much.
Ačiū už gautus klausimus.
Thank you for your questions. The question about steps in order to ensure proper information about methods and steps, and whether it's based on Washington and Morocco documents. This question will be answered by the representative of the Social Protection and Labor Ministry, Daiva Zaborauskienė. Thank you for the floor. I will give information about a collection of statistics. Here, I'm very happy about Lithuania's progress, extensive progress, because together with the State Data Agency, we started collecting a lot of data from administrative sources, and we have data in various sections also about people with disabilities based on their place of residence, age, gender, type, and severity of their disability, and other aspects. Since 2024, the State Data Agency started developing a project, a municipal project, Data Lab. It's a project for municipalities, and more than 400 municipality staff have joined this project. And here we accumulate information on persons with disabilities based on their age, functional obstacles, coordinates of the buildings of residence, municipality, and about what needs they could have in cases of emergency situations. So this information is available to all municipalities, and they really use this information. Concerning the Washington Group question inclusion, the State Data Agency integrated the short questions of the Washington Group, and they can collect internationally comparable data, analyze them based on gender, age, education, employment status, etc. A lot of data, additional data, are published on the in the scoreboards prepared by the Social Protection Ministry. Also, statistical data is also published by the Agency for the Protection of People with Disabilities, including the coordinating of help plans, etc. Thank you. Question about financing in order to make sure that the Human Rights Protection Institute functions properly, so that it remains independent and is able to function properly. This autumn, we are going to expand the functions of the Equal Opportunities Ombudsperson, and we ensure ever growing financing. Each year it's going to be increased. And in this office, as well as in the Institute for Human Rights, we're going to have more jobs in order to be able to better analyze complaints about the discrimination on the grounds of disability. And this question is going to be answered by the representative of Social Protection and Labor, Daiva Zabarauskienė. Thank you for the floor. Very specifically, let me speak about the Commission for the People with Disabilities since 2022, when 8,785 euros were allocated. So in 26, about 28,000 is allocated, and we do hope that in the future this financing will be increased. Thank you. Ačiū už atsakymus.
To my questions. That is the end of my questions, and I will now turn it back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank the task force member, Ms. Lavran, her question and comments, and the distinguished delegations of Lithuania for the response and explanation provided in the first part of the close to one. Now we will take a 15 minutes break. We shall reconvene the N4:45 to continue with the second round of the question concerning close to one. Thank you so much. Distinguished colleagues and members of the delegation, we now resume the 5th meeting. We will continue the second round of the back-to-back question and answer regarding Cluster 1. This segment will last for 30 minutes and will conclude at 5:15 p.m. Now, I open the floor to the committee expert for additional and follow-up questions regarding Cluster 1. Colleagues wishing to take the floor, please raise your name flag. Ms. LeBron Jacob, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to continue with some questions relating to just a few of the articles that we were just discussing. So my first question deals with Articles 1 to 4 again. And I'm wondering about the something called accreditation-based funding. So my question deals more specifically with how organizations of persons with disabilities are able to participate more broadly, participate in the design and co-design of laws, but also able to participate in consultations generally. So we've heard that since 2023, there's been a shift to this accreditation-based funding, and that by contrast, it increasingly restricts funded organizations to just doing service delivery, so that in many cases, they are not adequately resourced to do disability rights advocacy. So I was wondering if you could comment a bit on that and whether or not there's an impact on the ability of organizations of persons with disabilities to participate. I have another question as well. Sorry, just give me 1 second. I have a question as well that deals with women with disabilities. It stems from our report and concluding observations in 2016. Our committee recommended at that time that Lithuania include an explicit focus on the prevention and eradication of discrimination against women and girls with disabilities, including multiple and intersectional discrimination, this is a quote, as well as measures for their development, advancement, and empowerment to foster their participation in public life. The committee also recommended that Lithuania include measures to eradicate discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So these changes were to have been incorporated into the action plan that was then in place for 2015 to 2021. And I'm wondering if this actually had ever been accomplished. Was this done? And if not, are there steps now being taken to incorporate this focus on preventing discrimination against women in your action plans, in your policies? Thank you.
Ačiū už pateiktus klausimus.
Thank you. The question about what is accredited-based financing and how organizations working with persons with disabilities could participate broader in co-legislating, and whether there's been a shift in terms of this financing and how these organizations can participate in advocacy. And these questions will be answered by Ms. Chaplikina from the Agency of People with Disabilities. In national umbrella organizations for people with disabilities are supported through three ways. Since 2016 until 2026, 26 organizations are financed. They work in the areas of consultation, education, etc. And in terms of action plan for ensuring the level of participation of persons with disability, every year more than 1.7 million euros is allocated for these organizations. Through the measures implemented by the Ministry of Social Protection and Labor, organizations in the area of disability also are financed. They can get support for strengthening their for the programs of institution strengthening. For example, in 2025, more than 100,000 euros were allocated for that. Also in Lithuania, we have NGOs, the NGO fund. Through the tenders of this fund, NGOs in the area of disability can also obtain financing for their institutional strengthening. Also, I'd like to add that in 2025, 12 organizations received financing totaling 443,000 euros. And in 2026, 9 organizations received financing. Those were national organizations. They received financing amounting to 343,000 euros, namely to strengthen their institutional structure. And it's not only about services, it's also about the institutional strength of the organization and also advocacy in the area of persons with disability. NGOs active at the municipal level